wait a minute. What's so amazing about grace?
You are listening to All Things Grace podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Majors. This podcast is dedicated to answering one question: how can we move through life with more ease and flow and grace? How do we bring grace to family drama, our careers, our bodies, and health? What about racism and oppression? Or the most challenging of them all, ourselves? It's all about grace, y'all. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, and welcome to All Things Grace podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Majors. I am so glad you're here today. I have three amazing people who have been on the same journey of grief and loss, and they're here today to share with us just some of the ways that they're making it through. I know this show is about grace, and how do we find grace when we suffer tremendous loss or heartbreak? So I just want to thank Kathei, KJ, and Keonna for being here and just sharing your stories and actually stepping to that vulnerability space to hopefully help someone else. One of the things that I was challenged with as I was thinking about this episode is, how do I introduce these people? These are three people who I love and are powerhouse, amazing people. And I'm just like, it seems so diminishing to introduce you by what you do in the world, especially given how I feel about you.
I will just say that with regards to like how I want to be identified, or your question, I've gone through this phase of like, I don't want to be the person that, oh, that's Dre's mom, that's the woman whose son died. Like, I don't, like, I just have a thing about that. And so like, how can I fully be Keonna? And like that's a part of my experience. That's been a part of my life. It's a very significant part of my life. So just like not having that tag, I guess. So yeah, in the context of this conversation though, I don't know I'm Keonna, right? I'm Keonna.
Yeah.
And I do I just started a podcast. I live in Chicago. I'm from Seattle. Navigating life at 51 years old, trying to figure this shit out. That's me.
There it is. There it is. Okay.
Keonna did a great job of setting a foundation, because I'm figuring out who the hell I am now, again, in a whole different way, because, life just turned inside out just a little while ago. So I'm working on a new identification for myself, quite honestly. So right now, who I can say that I know that I am is that I know that I'm KJ. And I know all the things that brought me to the place that I am, but I no longer want to be identified by them. And I'm someone actively in the process of owning their narrative and rewriting their narrative. Right. So you could just say this, KJ.
And I'm cool, Michelle. Like I almost was like, you could take coach. Like, I'm not tied to any title. Like, titles are not my thing any longer, but if I have to have one. People know me as Coach Kathei, but I'm always trying to be known as just Kathei.
Each of you have a story, and they're familiar in a particular way. So I think I'm going to have start with you, Kathei, and tell us a little bit about your story, and just to give us some context.
Thank you, Michelle. On March 29th, 2013, my only son, my child, Kabrion Clark, who was 19 years old, was murdered. He was murdered in front of his girlfriend's home one Good Friday evening.
My God. Thank you, Michelle, for having me, for having us. And my son, my only child, DeAndre Dickerson, was killed April 14th, 2015 in Portland, Oregon, amongst, from what I can tell, from what I understand, amongst who he thought were his friends. Cold, rainy evening in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you. KJ.
Hello, Michelle, and Keonna and Kathei. I'm so happy to be here. June the 11th, 2022, I lost my fourth oldest son unexpectedly. I had actually traveled home back to Philadelphia, trying to reach my uncle before he passed away, but we made it there for the funeral. Came back from the funeral to the Airbnb and got the phone call that my daughter-in-law was on the phone and the police were on the phone. And so we were on the phone when they found him. And so he had died by himself, and his roommates had been in the house, and nobody checked on him. They thought that he was just asleep. And so he was there alone.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Okay. So, and as we move forward, I just really want to hold space and for your truths to be shared as they are in their form that they are in that minute. Because what I've learned is that it's 6:25 here this time. But at 6:28, you could feel a totally different way. So I just really want you all to have space to be where you are, and just wanted to say that. So I guess my first question is, when we talk about grace, what does that look like? And when you are, so there's the immediate experience and the shock, and you are disoriented and all of that. But once you start to try to reconcile it and accept it as a reality, did grace play a role for you intentionally? Like, did you say, okay, how can I find grace in this? Or did you experience grace in the process organically or from other people? Or how did grace show in your experience at any point in the journey? I'll start with Keonna.
I don't remember calling on grace or petitioning grace or anything like that in the early days. I don't recall that even being a part of my conversation. It might have been some form of grace, because I do remember distinctly. I remember this conversation I was having with myself, and I kept saying, I can't let this take me out. I can't let this take me out. I can't let this take me out. And I remember this feeling kind of after the initial shock, which lasted for, I don't know, weeks, months, I don't even remember. But I also remember saying, I'm all my grandson has, so I have to be like, I had to like keep myself together. So there was this sense of like, I guess if it's called grace, but like having this conversation with myself of, it's okay to kind of be in and out of whatever I was feeling, so that I could very Keonna like show up for my family, specifically for my grandson, in the way that I felt like I needed to show up for him. I felt like he needed some special attention. This literally happened 3 days after his birthday, after his 5th birthday. So he had just literally, we were all together, and we get on a plane going this way, he gets on the plane going that way. And then the next experience is my son is no longer with us. So But I don't remember. Grace came, and I have some examples of further down the line where I like really had to tap into grace, specifically along the conversation around law enforcement and court and all that other stuff. But
yeah.
yeah.
Anybody called to go next?
I can. Grace showed up for me early, and I'm a lot like Keonna. Like, I don't know if I knew or recognized it was Grace, even though I was a whole minister. Grace wasn't the first thing I called upon. But where Grace showed up early, as I reflect, it was when I tried to go back to work after 2 weeks only off.
Oh.
I tried to go back, and I remember everyone telling me, you got to go back to work. You got to, just keep yourself busy. You just push it away and you keep moving, right? Is what I was told. You keep preaching. As a preacher, I was like given a mic to preach about it, to testify about it. And it wasn't until I went back to work after 2 weeks and I was at my desk and I broke down. There was no way I could show up. And in that moment, I remember leaving, going to my therapist, and my therapist saying, yeah, like you need to be off. And so the first thing is Grace gave me permission to grieve, to be sad, to not be the same person that I was. Like, that was one of the biggest lessons, was I had to give myself grace, because I continue try to find that girl before her son was murdered. I continue to find that person who was happy, life seemed to be going well, everything seemed to be on the track to success, when it was interrupted with this murder. And Grace gave me the permission to be a new person. Grace gave me the permission to say, like, you don't have to be connected to the same people you were connected with before. And like, Grace gave me this big permission slip to like clean the slate and start over. And what do you want to be now? What do you want to do now? Who do you want to be in your life now? Because before that, I gave everyone else grace but myself. So Grace gave me permission to open up wide, to be sad, to not want to show up, to quit things, to walk away from friendships. One of the greatest pieces of advice I got during this time was grieve everything with your son. And so at the time, like, Grace gave me the ability to figure out, and I think we can all understand that in-between space. Who am I in between? What is going on? Like, I know there's a light that's showing up somewhere on this road, but right now it's so dark. And Grace just said, there's no rules here, Kathei.
Yeah.
Find your way the best way you can.
That's good. Hey, Jay.
Well, I was sitting here, actually, being very deeply grateful for the inspiration that Kathei and Keonna, that both of you are providing to me by your presence, by your words. Inspiration that one day I'm going to be on the other side in a different way, and that hey, it's possible. I would say that the most simplest way that grace showed up for me was that I just couldn't function anymore. And for me, the oldest child, the oldest grandchild, the one responsible, the problem solver, the one who finds the solutions, the one who finds a way to make it happen, right? I couldn't make anything happen anymore. I couldn't find it in me. It's like his death, the suddenness, the unexpectedness of it the not knowing how much pain he was in, the knowing he was alone for so long by himself and not knowing how long he knew that.
Mm.
I I didn't have anything to give. And then I was feeling guilty, but then I was too tired to even feel guilty. I couldn't even manage that. But you know, Grace also, I would say my total emotional breakdown was a gift because it also allowed me to just see the world differently and to reckon with choices that I had made and to look at relationships differently. And even though still today I don't have a lot of emotional energy for people, um, I'm still trying, you know? And so I think that's one of the most powerful ways that grace showed up for me is the fact that I'm still here and I'm still trying and I'm not trying to fix everything. I'm really trying to allow myself to hold myself, but I'm not that great at it because I'm usually just holding everybody else. And the folks around me are learning how to hold me, and that's its own journey, so
There were a few things mentioned here, and I'm curious to know that strong Black woman narrative. Did that make it hard for you to, one, allow people to contribute to you, or did it put you in a place where you weren't allowed to move into those vulnerable spaces because you felt like the narrative is that I have to power through? Because most of the times that's how we all kind of do it. We do things, we just do it. Would you say that that narrative played out in any way during this time and allowing you to grieve?
Definitely the strong Black woman trope played a part in my grief. Right away, it was that I remember being in the hospital not crying.
Mm-hmm.
I remember all the people around me crying and losing their minds, and I wouldn't cry. Like, just, I was worried, I was worried. I was worried what they would think. No one had saw me cry at that level of what was about to let go. So the first thing I did was try to be strong and like not cry. And I even remember at the funeral, like being in the limousine and people walking past me and I'm smiling and shaking hands at the funeral of my child, my only son, who just died. And so there was like early in those early stages, it looked that way. It looked just like what you mentioned as well, as like I, being a preacher, just knew that, he's in a better place. I got him, all the stuff that people were telling me, all the things that I had told other people myself as a minister, as a preacher. And so I was really hard on myself around grief and around that debilitating grief that I was going through where I couldn't even get out of the bed. And so there was a lot of shame that I attached to me because I could not operate as the same person that I was before this thing happened to me. And people were calling on me. I mean, people expected me to continue to preach, to teach, to do all the things that I was doing through my grief. And I was told over and over, like, this is how you do it. You work through it. You work through it, Kathei. Don't stop. And so I fell into that. But where I finally kind of rose up was there was a point where you mentioned, like, could I ask for help? Because that's the other thing around the strong Black woman. Can you ask for help? And I thought I was asking for help. I didn't think I needed to. My only child was just murdered. Why do I need to tell you that I need help? So that was a hard lesson for me. Like, how do I tell people I need help? I mean, honestly, I'm gonna tell y'all, there was a time where I literally almost cut myself so that I could be admitted to a hospital with an open wound so that people around me knew I was hurting. I thought maybe if I cut myself, maybe if they can see blood, they would know that I am in pain. And it felt like, and I think how I now characterize this as, they wanted all my power and none of my pain. I kept screaming for places that would accept my pain. I want to be with people that could accept this pain, because this pain now lives with me forever. And I can't be in relationship with people, places, or things where my pain is not accepted. And that's been a journey though. But in the beginnings, I was really fell into not only my own beliefs around being strong and what it meant to work through pain. It meant to keep working, to push it down, not to ask for help, not to tell anybody, to hide it, to now all I do is talk about pain. And now I've opened myself up to how pain is something and grief is sacred. And I would have never done that had it been for this. And so like, it's just all full circle for me. It's all full circle. And I stand in the place now that I've redefined what strong means. Strong means that I stop and tend to myself when I need to heal.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I second that emotion. I think I will say that I had such, and I don't know everyone's experience around the death, these types of death or the things that they experience, but I had blankets and blankets of love that just covered me for weeks and months on end. Like the way that the community and people came from under the rocks and out the weeds to support me, to me, I remember saying, this is what love looks like in action. Like it was so palatable. I could feel it. I could touch it. I could taste it. I could smell it. Like when I looked up, every day there was someone at my house cooking for me, taking out my trash, walking my dog, feeding my dog. I didn't drive for months. Like people drove me everywhere. I had such a huge support system and team, like people like Michelle, like Kathei, like Veronica, like there's, Maria, there's a ton of people that just, I didn't have to ask. There were people would be like, what do you want? And I would be like, I don't know what the fuck I want. Like, and so like, what? I've never experienced this before. I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want. I knew that I wanted licorice. I knew that I wanted champagne. Those are the two. I lived off of those two things whenever I turned around, I had abundance of licorice and I had an abundance of champagne, right? People just came and sat with me and just were there, just for weeks and months on end. So the support was there. I didn't have to ask for it. I do remember thinking in my head, after all the hoopla dies down, and all these people are going to go away, and it's just going to be me, then what, right? And then I remember having these conversations with myself around, like, nobody's calling me anymore. Nobody's checking for me. Nobody's reaching out to me to ask me what I need. And to me, it could have been 3 months later, but it seemed like it just happened, right? For me, it just this just happened. And how has everybody moved on with their lives? Like, how is everybody's gone back to work. My house is empty. Like what, and so then I had to start asking, and that was really tough. It was really tough to say, I just need and want somebody to sit here with me or be here with me or go on a walk with me or whatever. And so then I just started writing. I just poured my heart out on Facebook. I just poured my heart out every day, or however, whenever I was so compelled. That was my way of just sort of releasing. And people would be like, you are so strong. You're the strongest person I know. I don't know anybody stronger than you, Keonna. And I would just be like, but I'm not fucking strong, right? And then I one of the best things that I think I did for myself was I started counseling pretty soon. My victims advocate connected me with a therapist in Seattle that specialized in what they call complicated grief. So grief as a result of homicide, suicide, or violent deaths, because they're very complicated. And that was one of the best things that I did for myself in asking for help and getting the help that I needed. I was there before the therapist was there. I was there every week. And then I got with it. We did group therapy. So there was sessions where I was with other folks that were grieving their children, or family members, close family members that had those sorts of complicated deaths. So I had to reconcile with myself what I needed and actually make the steps to actually go get the things that I needed. Say to people, I'm actually not strong. And I remember saying to my therapist, like, I felt like that was the only place that I could actually break down and crumble into a snotty mess, was in her office. And everywhere else I felt like I had to be strong and be put together. And she was, and I felt like if I fall apart at home, who is going to be there to put me back together? I mean, who everybody's moved on with their life. Who's gonna put me back together? And so she gave me that space to just fall apart, and she would continuously remind me that I had everything I needed inside of me to put myself back together. So it was tough, and it's still tough. I mean, it's tough. Even as we got on this call, I was saying how much I miss you, Kathei, and I miss you, Michelle. Living in Chicago, and I'm fairly alone here, right? As far as a support system, and so I even struggle with reaching out across the states, or I've said to Kathei, Kathei, I need you to put me in your prayer circle. I need to put me in your text list, because I need to hear from you. I need to know you're thinking about me. But I had to open my mouth and say, this is what I need, and so it's a continual evolution and journey of stepping into and being vulnerable and saying, actually, I'm not okay right now. I'm not, and I just need you to talk. Yeah. So
Yeah, I was trying to think of how this idea of being a strong Black woman, how that really showed up for me. And I was just sitting here realizing everything is kind of a blur in some ways. Because I feel I can remember the instant that they pronounced him as gone, and I just dropped the phone, and there's just a blood curdling scream, and it seemed like I just screamed for hours. I don't remember stopping my crying while I was packing. I cried, the entire time. And I cried on the 6-hour flight home. I literally cried. I cried so much. Poor guy next to us, he eventually gave us the row. And or he switched seats with us is what he did, because I was crying so much, and we were separated because we got the flight at the last minute. And so I just share that because this was the first thing, and I had already weathered my former spouse, my husband, passing away, and the complications with him passing away being that he had an affair for quite some time, and then I found out, and we went to counseling so that we could have an amicable divorce. And so we committed to 6 months. And then at the end of that 6 months, I said, I want to go. And he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so both he and I were ministers in the church. And that process began to unravel some pretty significant things in me. And so I had that experience where I lost my church community. No one showed up. And because I started writing and pouring my heart out, which meant I started coming out publicly. as queer, and so, you know, people would say all kinds of things to you. So with my son, so having navigated that, and I lost my grandmother, one of my primary caregivers, 10 days before I lost my husband. And so I was experienced with the loss, but I was not experienced with this loss. And this loss hit me in a way that I I don't ever want to experience it again. I don't want anyone to experience it. But I didn't have, I like disintegrated. I, when I say I didn't have it, all of who I was, my ability to raise 6 children, go to school full time, and work a full time job, and get two degrees, that was gone. The workaholic destroyed. The desire, the passion, like disappeared. So I, there was no strength. There was just a lot of fucking anger, a lot of anger at God, at the world, at life, you know, at all of it. And because I spent the majority of my life being disconnected from my emotions, trauma, lived experience, etc., when those emotions hit, I was undone. Like I didn't know how to even be with my emotional self.
Mhm.
And I'm still learning how to do that. So but the community that I had was amazing. Like, I mean, people like Michelle showing up, offering time, offering, you know, to step in with our client partners, which is a big deal because if we don't work here, I mean, we don't eat. We make our own paycheck. So community came in and they provided food. I was getting cards every week. Folks were sending Facebook messages, and I can say that people are still reaching out, and I'm grateful for that because of my other experiences, I thought community would disappear, and so I didn't have that expectation, not even from my family, because my family, you know, when I came out, it hit everyone. But everyone showed up. And so there again, I would say the grace of God poured in without me having to really ask for it because I was just a little disintegrated.
As you talk about who you were then, what did you learn about yourself, or what are you learning about yourself?
Well, the thing that I've learned and that I'm continuing to learn has been how little I've actually centered myself, taken care of myself, prioritized myself, loved myself, valued myself, found myself worthy of taking space when I need it. How little of all of that I did for myself. It was like losing him, you know, one day they're there, the next day they're gone. Um, in the place where I felt like I had lost everything and that there was like no more me left is where I was able to actually see myself. And then I was angry again. I was angry, quite honestly, about all the dumb choices that I could now see that I made and all the opportunities. And I just mean opportunities in life. I'm not talking about money or anything like that, just overall. And now look, where are you at now? Okay, and what does this mean? Because now suddenly, like, none of this means anything. I don't care. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care. I don't care. And only I can't. That's the only words that I can actually give you. But I do care enough to continue to try to show up in ways that are honorable, you know, and loving and kind and responsible. But I don't have a whole lot of that because the learning I think is very specific to who you are as an individual. Because when you lose, in this case, a child, a part of you, that's not, it's not a loss you can find words to explain. The words just cannot encapsulate the depth of loss, the ripping apart of the void, the deep fucking cavern that it's not like, and I don't mean any disrespect, but it's not like losing a spouse and then 10 years later you go get married again. It's not. And again, I don't mean any disrespect, but I can't replace my child. There was only one of him. Right? So I guess what people, the little bit I have to offer, because I'm so raw in this, is learn to be with yourself and to love your whole self. Even all the parts that you look at and that you feel ashamed of, angry about, embarrassed by, in light of the loss, love those too. And just make peace with those parts of you so that you can go ahead and take whatever the next step is. I don't know if it's a step or it's a belly flop. Like, I don't really know how people move forward in this here thing right here, but you know, that's about as good as I give it right now. I ain't got nothing else right now. Next.
Oh.
I think what I'm learning in this journey process, whatever it seems, I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is that I can do hard things. Like, I think I'm learning that it's hard. Like, I tried to avoid this. Like, if I could avoid this, anyone would avoid this pain. Like, this is immeasurable pain. But I've learned piece by piece that I'm looking at, like, 10 years now. This year would be 10 years. And I remember Keonna and I talking about it early on, like 10 years, that we couldn't even imagine what it would look like 10 years from then. But from this perspective, I think I've learned that, like, to live, like, I think what I hear KJ even talking about is, like, I learned where I wasn't living. I learned where I was merely existing and getting by. I learned that, because that's the one thing death will teach you, is about living and living more abundantly, really living. And I learned that there was more to me than just being a mom, because I was so wrapped up. My whole life at that point was being a mother. The reason I was at church doing what I was doing there, the reason what I was doing at work, it all had to be a good mother. And so what I learned is that there's Kathei, there's another person there other than the mama, that there is more to me, that I could like really face this hard shit and come out on the other side different and changed, and still like feeling that there's a reason for me to exist. There was so much that I just thought I was existing because I was a mama. Like, there's so much more for me. And in that early place, for someone who's like in that early stage of grief, I think what I learned in my early stage was there are no rules, honey. There are no rules. Do you the best that you can. Like, I had to learn to find my voice, to stick up for myself, to say, no, I'm not coming there. No, I'm not doing that. Yes, I'm going to stay home. Yes, I haven't got out of the bed in 5 days. Like I learned a whole new roar. Like, I had to protect myself the same way I protected my son. I had to learn now how to protect me, to give me what I needed, because I was never going to be the same, that I was going to be raw. This wound was always going to feel the wind and get hurt again. It's going to always get rubbed on. The scab's going to come off every once in a while. And I learned that that's okay. It's a process. And I learned that Kathei is deserving of those people that Keonna was talking about, and that the people that come around you. Like, I had to create that. And I learned that I'm deserving of a community that can care for my emotions and care for this new person that now is walking and living with this huge wound.
This is so good. I will say, I had I had to learn to mourn the old Keonna. And that was really, really fucking hard.
Mm.
And coming to grips with not only did my son die, but I died. Like this Keonna pre April 14th was gone. That person did not exist anymore. This at a cellular level, I was a whole different human. And wrestling with that and reckoning with that is something I'm still reckoning and wrestling with. It just, I think Kathei, you touched on this earlier. Like I felt like I was in the groove of my life. Like things were going. I had just started my consulting business. Like life was good. I was in a good relationship. Like I'm clicking on all cylinders. Like things are good. I mean, we had went to Six Flags to celebrate my grandson's birthday. My son, my grandson's mom, my grandson. We're having the time of our lives. I get home and bam.
Mm-hmm.
Like my whole fucking life, like as I knew it, ended, like that in that moment. And so like when people say here today, gone tomorrow, like literally for me it was here today, gone today, because I talked to my son earlier in the day, and then later that day he was gone. So what I've had to learn is how to grieve and let go of Keonna pre April 14th. And embrace like all the things that you all have been talking about. Embrace, because very much like Kathei, everything about my existence was DeAndre. Everything that my identity, when I walked down the street, people were like, "Hi, DeAndre's mom." I'd be like, I had a whole name before DeAndre was born. Like my whole identity was being DeAndre's mom. And so I was no longer DeAndre's mom in the sense of like it was just me. And one of the things that I did in sort of this journey of like letting go of that, Keonna was moving to Chicago. And because I felt like there was so much of everything that was Keonna pre April 14th was DeAndre. So whenever anybody saw me, they were like, "Oh," or people that didn't know for whatever reason, they'd be like, "Well, how's DeAndre doing?" And I'd just be like, "Oh fuck." I mean, like it was just there were so many triggers, there were so many reminders, and I said, I need to reset. I need to like figure out who Keonna is outside of being the lady whose son was killed or DeAndre's mom, or I need to figure that out. And I had DeAndre when I was 19 years old. And so I was a kid myself. And so even now at 51 years old, I still amaze myself and sometimes get frustrated and mad at myself that I'm 51 years old and I'm just now figuring out I fucking love live music, or I love to go to the ballet, or like I love like the things that I love and the attention that I'm giving myself and the care that I'm giving myself and the acceptance that I'm giving myself. I mean, had I known what the other side was going to be like, I probably would have accepted it earlier. But like just going through that journey of letting go of the old Keonna, and I had many counseling services with my counselor about it. Like I didn't want to let her go because she was very charismatic. She was very, she was risk taking, and something about like these sorts of losses, I became very pessimistic. I became very cautious. Like I didn't like those things about myself. I don't want. I want to be like fly by the seat of your pants, just kind of winging it and just doing the things and leaving your door unlocked and all that. Now I'm double checking everything, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that part that was emerging.
I have a question for you, Keonna. Can I jump in
Absolutely.
here and ask you that question? It just resonated with me so deeply. You talking about needing to Well, you didn't say you needed to kill the old Keonna. You just need to let her go, right?
Mhm.
You just need to let her go. It feels like death to me.
Mhm.
It feels like death to me. So maybe
Mhm.
that's why I came up with that. But what did even the beginnings of that look like for you, right? Like I know that I'm still trying to work in the same way and I just can't.
You can't.
I can't like I don't even I'm not the same. I
You're not.
don't know what I am. I'm all mixed up inside. So I'm just kind of doing whatever I can to function and keep
Mhm.
life going.
Mhm.
But how did you even begin that letting go
Ooh.
process?
Yeah, lots and lots of therapy. I will say that.
I'm in there. I'm in there.
Lots and lots of therapy and like I would come to my therapy sessions week after week and like I don't want to let her go. I like that Keonna and I don't like this Keonna that I am right now. And so I remember my therapist saying, her recommending me to just go do things that you think you like to do, like find some joy somewhere. Right. So I was previously this girl that I didn't need to, I felt like now I have to manufacture happiness and manufacture joy, like find something to be happy about, find
Yes.
some reason to be joyful. Where before that I was just a joyful person. Now I have to manufacture it. Right. And so she in order like she just kind of encouraged me to manufacture it, like go find some things that will bring you some joy, like just try some things out. And so then once you just start trying some stuff out and manufacturing it, it becomes less manufactured, it becomes like it happens, it's more organic, right? And so then I started to step into, I remember the first time I went somewhere by myself here in Chicago. I don't know nobody here. I've been here 5 years, almost 5 years this month. And I really still don't really know anybody here. And so I remember just being really afraid to go anywhere by myself. Like I can go anywhere in Seattle and I'm going to see somebody I know, or, I'm from there. But going somewhere by myself here was really strange for me. And then I just did it one time. I went to like a happy hour by myself, and then I went to dinner by myself, and I would like take myself on dates. Like I would get dressed up and do those. Then I just started to like go on Groupon and look up stuff and just go do things, trying to find and manufacture joy. And that's where I began to learn and uncover some stuff about Keonna. I know that I love water. I know that that is like when all else fails, I can go to the water. And so I spent a lot of time at the water, a lot of time walking and just sitting there crying and spitting and screaming, mad at God. So I didn't talk to God for like several years,
Mhm.
several years, several years. I just kind of started like texting him just a little bit ago. I mean, just like a hey, how you doing? Nothing, just real surface level stuff, but like literally real mad at God, because I'm like, God, you control this whole situation and you could have did a whole bunch of things differently, and so I'm gonna need you to tell me why you didn't. So but I will say therapy. And literally, like I will say, someone asked me about my tenure here in Chicago and what has Chicago meant to me or something like that just the other day. And I said, I feel like I found myself when I grew up here.
Mhm.
5 years ago, February 22nd, I moved here. And I literally was like, I need to reset, regroup, realign, refocus, reunite, re like all these things. And I can't do it here with all of these things that are triggering me. And if I need to go back to Seattle, Seattle's always there. I spend a lot of time there. I go there and visit all the time. But I feel like I finally figured myself out and found myself. I had to separate myself from my family, separate myself from everyone. And then just in the last couple of years, God even did a whole little number. And even the little circle that I had here, he kind of like pulled that out from under me too and was like, so what you're going to do is sit down by your own self. you're gonna it's just gonna be me and you, kid, and we're just gonna you're gonna really get to know yourself, right? And I've spent a lot of time with myself, and I've learned to learn to appreciate some things about myself that I never did before, love myself like I never did before, enjoy my own fucking company, right? Not feel like I have to have somebody around or somebody, like enjoy my own company, curled up on the couch watching TV all by my goddamn self. And it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Right? Yeah, but it's a journey. And this is, so I'm coming up on 8 years in April. And this sort of turning the corner for me. I remember I spoke in Seattle at this gun violence awareness thing. And I remember that was like a pivotal point for me where I had spoke about my son many, many times before. And I spoke about him from the perspective of that he died and like the events of his death. And I remember saying, I want folks to remember that my son lived. And I spoke about him in a very, very different way. And I was like, I'm tired of grieving. I'm tired of being sad. I'm tired of crying all the time. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of, and so I shifted, like, even how I talked about my son sort of shifted in me and shifted like how I showed up and can have conversations. I couldn't have conversations without being a blubbering mess for many years, many years. And I literally have just turned the corner. And it was like when I made this declaration, I started to really kind of come into myself. And yeah, that letting go of that Keonna of the past and really stepping into who I get to be, who God called me to be, the gifts that I have, letting the world know that my son lived and not just that he died.
I love all of that. I'm loving it just from a grieving mama, but I'm also loving it from a friend of Keonna who's been with you on the journey, just to hear that. If I could just say, like, what I did was I took courage on as my damn cloak, and I did big moves. Like, I left my church after 14 years. I left my job after 22 years. I left relationships. Like, I did big things because I took advantage of the no filter that I had as part of grief, where I was low tolerance, like no filter. And so it was fun to play with. I played with what it looked like if I just spoke my mind, because I hadn't in so long. What would it look like if I just jumped instead of waiting for someone's permission or someone to push me? What if I just jumped and got out of these things? And so, like, I don't know if I give that advice to everyone, but that's literally what I did. Is I took big, huge jumps, and I used that loss, that thing is it's the biggest thing that ever happened. What can happen to me now? What can hurt me more than this? And that was the courage I needed to make huge changes in my life. So, yeah.
All right. We're going to end it right there. But guess what? We will be back next week with part 2. And we'll be talking about guilt, how to manage guilt through this process and through these losses that we face. But before we do, we have a fill in the blank question. And I'm going to ask each of you to go around. So the fill in the blank is: grace is, Kathei.
Life-giving.
It's love and acceptance.
Grace is sufficient.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to continue this conversation. Y'all out there, you get to hear it next week. Take care.